everyone. It's good to see you back at VBS again tonight. We've had 2 good nights of VBS, but I've just got a couple announcements to make. We have a choke thing here that Tony ordered, and if someone gets choked in the building while they're here, this will be in the nursery in the back. So remember, we have it. And also, for the VBS Fun Day, this is Saturday at Willow Springs. There's a sign-up sheet, and this sign-up sheet's going to be on the table in the foyer. So the night before you go out, sign up what you want to bring, and we'd like to see everybody that's here over there Saturday. You'll have a big time, whether you're 12 or you're 65 or you're 95 or whatever. Come on out and enjoy the fun. We have a big time every time we get together, and won't be no different this time. There'll be some shade trees and stuff and that we can sit under and just have a wonderful time. But this sheet's going to be on the table, and this is going to be in the nursery. Thank you.
All right. Randy told us about choking.
I was wondering why they got it.
Yeah. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Everybody back?
Yeah!
All right. Let's try that again. One more time. Is everybody back?
Yeah!
All right. I believe they are. I believe they are back. Okay. Who can tell me how many hours is in a day?
24!
24 hours. Very good. And what does that matter? How many of those days did it take for God to make the world?
6!
6. All right. So he's powerful. Who can tell me the memory verse?
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay, very good. Genesis what?
1 through 1.
1:1. Okay, that's not too hard to remember. All right, very good. Y'all are learning. We're halfway through. Got some more to learn. I think we're going to be pretty sharp by the time we're done with this, don't you? I think we'll all have learned a lot. I think even the adult classes might pick it up a little bit tonight. You going to challenge us some more, Drew, tonight? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. All right. We'll stick with our regular schedule we've been going with. And Mr. Drew is going to lead us in song again. So come on, Drew.
Blue skies and rainbows and sunbeams from heaven are what I can see. When my sins live in me, I know that Jesus is well and alive today. He makes his home in my heart. Nevermore will I be all alone since he promised me. up?
No. Yeah.
You think you should try to level it up? Yeah, that's right. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's pretty good. We might have to try to go 3 times this soon. Let's try booze, Okay, everybody go quiet. And red group, you go ahead and stand up. We'll let you guys be dismissed first. Go right ahead. So you lead the way. Okay. You are in green group. Go ahead and stand up. And hold on, Mason. We'll let you hold them up right there. We're still waiting on some. Well, green group's gone. All right, follow me. You are in blue group. Go ahead and stand up. Tyler, you lead the way. And in yellow, you go ahead and stand up. Good. And the beige. Kind of those bolded bullet points there on the page. Tonight we're just going to talk about some introductory points. We'll talk about some philosophical considerations here in a moment, some scientific considerations, and then if you flip it over to the back, we'll talk about, this is the big point, by the way, which I'll make clear by the end of the lesson for sure, some revelational considerations. And then tomorrow night we'll talk about a couple of particularities, such as the age of the earth, macroevolution versus microevolution, and then also we'll talk a little bit about the global flood. This lesson tonight is going to set up for where we head tomorrow night. So if tomorrow night we've got somebody that's with us that hasn't been here, I'm going to have to maybe allude back to this lesson just a little bit to try to reform my evidence or my argumentation. But anyway, I've been asked to handle a little bit more of the thornier stuff. Some of this was in the workbook, and I tried to blend it all together so we could try to hit it all in one or two lessons. So point number 1 there in the introduction, an exclusive scientific approach to origins is simply insufficient to handle all of the complexities involved. So for instance, what I mean to say is this. We have multiple disciplines in our world. There are disciplines of history, archaeology, mathematics. There are disciplines of, did I say history? I feel like did I say that already? Okay, so history, philosophy, mathematics, archaeology, other disciplines that exist than just a biological
scientific approach. Now, the reason that's important is because a large number of the atheistic community, or we might even go a little bit further than that and say the skeptical community, is made up of individuals who are appealing to biological sciences. Listen to this line that I heard from a member of the church. A member of the church said this line a couple of years ago. I heard it through the grapevine, and an individual was arguing, the only way that we can know things at all is through a scientific method. Let me tell you what the scientific method is before you agree or disagree with that statement. The scientific method is the idea that something has to be verifiable by scientific laboratory testing. So we have a hypothesis, we put it to the test, we test it over and over again, it holds true, and therefore it's verifiable scientifically. That's the scientific method. What is wrong with making a claim such as the only way we can know something is by the scientific method?
Hone in on only our senses and things like that to be able to say if something's...
Yeah, so we're dependent on empiricism. Hear, taste, touch, smell, you get the idea. But in the statement itself, I would have liked to have asked this individual, had I been involved in that discussion, that statement itself, was that proven by the scientific method? The only way we can know something is by the scientific method. I'd like to know how they proved that. You see my point? That gets problematic, but that's what we're being trained to think in our public schools right now. Our public schools are teaching us the only thing we can know is through the scientific method, and that's just simply false, folks. That's very false. Tina, go ahead.
It denies God.
It could deny.
Him as first, as all being, all deity. It goes by what man believes, not what God has done.
That is true. That is true. The appeal is to think that man's got to have the grasp on the know-how. And so God is not necessarily excluded as much as man has repositioned himself to be over God. And what I mean by that is the people that aren't necessarily atheistic might say we've got to know things by the scientific approach, and because they don't see a direct link to God, they're going to say there is no God. Or at least they're going to say we can't prove there is a God. Because why? Well, we've not seen the scientific evidence for him. I'm going to insist that scientifically, that's not my dependency on which I rest my case for God. I believe there are other avenues, specifically philosophical avenues, that would allow us to argue for the existence of a deity that exists outside of time and space. And so we'll get into that here in just a moment, but the point I'm seeking to make is that an exclusive scientific approach is simply insufficient to handle the discussion of origin. It may shade in the colors. It may add a little bit of the detail. And so we might get from Genesis chapter 1, we might get some scientific detail, but the science itself is insufficient to prove the existence of the God of the Bible. And that's what we're seeking to do. So appealing to science is somewhat insufficient. Look at 1a. At some point, we must realize that biological or natural scientific method only deals with one angle of the creation account or origins. Now, I've got a question on here that I don't have a blank for, but that's okay. 1b asks this question. How would you answer the question, why does water boil? Now, let me give you my answer, and you see if you agree with this or not. Well, you see, if you took a saucepan, you filled it with water, you put it on a burner, and let's say that water starts off at a colder temperature, at least lukewarm. And over a few minutes, you know, you've got the burner on a certain amount of temperature, it heats the water up, and because of that, the molecules start to be agitated by the heat, they start to move faster, and when they hit 212 degrees Fahrenheit, the water boils. How many of you feel like, thumbs up if you feel like that's a good explanation? How many of you feel like that's a bad explanation? Anybody think that's a bad explanation? What do you,
An explanation.
It's an explanation. Excellent. See, what do you do for work right now, Justin?
I'm a laboratory technician at a chemical company.
So he is a chemist at Eastern. Get that. So he knows more about this than I do. What am I saying? What if I said this? Everybody said that's a pretty good explanation. It's an explanation. It's a good one. What if I told you the only reason the water's boiling is because I wanted to fix myself a cup of tea? Would you think that's a good explanation? It is a good explanation. It's not the scientific one, but I'm simply pointing out that it's not a scientific question exclusively. Science is insufficient to handle some questions. If I'm asking why the water is boiling from a scientific angle, the scientific answer is the one you want to give. But if I'm asking why from a personal standpoint, that's not a scientific question. Why was the water boiling? Because an individual had a desire, because an individual placed it there and he wanted a cup of tea. That's a different answer, but they're not antithetical, are they? These are complementary answers. It's both the scientific explanation and the personal explanation. And so I'm saying this, when we come to the biblical account of creation, and we only answer with a scientific answer, we are eroding part of the answer that God's expecting us to glean. There is another angle here, and I would insist that there's a discipline that the scientific angle simply doesn't like in a lot of ways, and that is a theological angle. And that's what we're talking about, of course, when we talk about the study of God. Any comments or questions up through question 1? Justin, go ahead.
My only qualm when people try to use a scientific explanation to explain why the world works in such a way is that science does not answer why.
Excellent.
Merely answers how it functions.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's it. It gives those details, doesn't it?
It's observable. That's all science is. It's what we observe.
Yes. How many of you do read like in the scientific genre at all? Like even a little bit? Okay, so we've got a few. The scientific community is getting really nasty in a lot of ways. I know there's some really good folks out there, but the scientific community has gone so far. Sorry about that, Eric. I should have picked up on that. I'll let you take a few. If some others come in, you might hand those out to you. Just take them instead. Thank you, sir. No, you're fine. The scientific community has gotten almost to the point where it's hardwired into our DNA. And so some of the stuff coming out of the scientific community these days, we hear about a gay gene. Do you buy that? Do you buy that in light of a God who created us, so says James 1, that cannot be tempted, neither tempts he any man with evil, but he would create it in our DNA to be homosexual? Folks, this is not able to be stomached. Not by Christians. It may be tolerated by the world, but it's not by Christians. People who are God-fearers, who believe in God, simply can't tolerate the idea that this has been hardwired into our DNA, that everything has been predetermined, and we have no free choices where the biological community is taking us. Caleb had a point for us.
Just continuing on what you were talking about with the scientific method, how people, they're trying to corner God. Going back to what Tina said, because if that were true, then where's the proof for the Ark of the Covenant? Or, because I'm sure God's never going to let us find that. Or what about, Noah's Ark? Is there remnants of that have been found? We think that it was in Turkey, but there's really no way of knowing as far as I can tell. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to corner God and say, well, unless we know through science, there's no way to know. But faith and science have always supposed to be working together, not at opposite ends.
Right, and that's a great point. Faith and science should be compatible. If you don't think they're compatible, you need either a new science or a new faith. Now, that's kind of the point Justin was making as well, that the details answer the how, but they don't answer the why. We'd have to go back and ask why the universe ever began in the first place. And the biological community is just not able to do that, folks. It's just not. If you're only looking at it from a biological lens, you're not going to get the answer that you need. We still would not be able to explain the origins of the universe. I watched a debate with Richard Dawkins, who was a professor of biological sciences at Oxford, and he was talking with John Lennox, who incidentally is a professing Christian and is a professor of mathematics at Oxford. So they're both highly credentialed, and Dawkins has to admit we don't know why the universe began, nor do we really know its origin in the first place. Well, I think we've got a better explanation than that. And certainly I'm not going to like to end my life being, let's say, 75 years old, not knowing anything about the origin of the world. Look, a worldview, so said, I think it was Ravi Zacharias, he said it this way: your worldview is this. It answers the question of where we came from, what we're doing while we're here, and where are we going. Now, the Christian worldview can answer all three of those questions. A biological explanation cannot. A biological explanation cannot answer not only one, but not three of those. Okay, they don't know where we came from. They don't really know what's going on while we're here, and they don't know what's going to happen. And that is where we turn to the biblical text for answers rather than the big hitters of the world, okay? The big hitters of the world, so it's been for at least 6,000 years since the world stood, they don't have a clue what they're doing in many cases. So let's just go ahead and give up on the appeal to authority and recognize that there is an authority. It's Jehovah God. And if there's a book that's trustworthy, if there's a source that is trustworthy, maybe it's the holy text. Point number 2. When we think about God, we need to understand that He is a being that is above. He transcends natural law or science. Let me ask you this question. I think I've used this illustration before. I think I've got a $5 bill in my wallet. Okay, there it is. Look at this. I have some money in my name. Imagine that I take this $5 bill, and I take it home tonight, and I put it into the drawer of my desk there at the home office. And tomorrow night, I go into the room, and I slide open the drawer to the desk, and the $5 is still there. I go in the night after that, Friday night, and I pull open the drawer again to check to make sure my $5 is there. And instead of a $5 bill, I find 4 ones. Which one do I say? Do I say the law of the planet Earth has been broken? Or do I say the law of Tennessee has been broken? Law of Tennessee, right? Somebody stole my money is what I'm going to say. What's the point? With God, there is such a thing as a miracle. There is such a thing as a miracle. And what He does then is He doesn't break the laws that govern our planet. We don't walk into the room and say, "My, a miracle has occurred." What we say is the law has been broken of the state of Tennessee, not the laws of nature. Now here's my point. God so designed the laws of nature to work in a way that they are reliable. Gravity still functions. If we toss the wallet up, the wallet comes down. These rules that govern our planet are still functional. However, what happens is it's not an erosion of the system of the natural laws. But what happens when God works a miracle is He interjects a new act into the system. It's not that He kills the whole system. He interjects an act, and it's because He plays by His own rules. A miracle is an act of God where He can step into the system and interject a new act or activity. And it's not that He erects the whole system. He's doing something because He has the power to transcend it and go above and beyond it. Now, if you take a look at number 2 then, when He transcends natural law or sciences, the sciences then, whatever we see as far as the details go, whatever happened with my money, that should support God's existence, but it doesn't replace such. So let me say what I mean. We could walk away. I could walk away and say the $5 bill that now has only been into 4 ones, I'm missing $1. I could say a miracle has occurred. But given that I'm depending on the natural state of things, that wouldn't be my first reaction, would it? My first reaction would be to say, somebody stole my money. That says something about the nature of the miracles of the New Testament. It actually says in a number of places in the Gospel of John that these people were not eager to believe. It actually says that in many of the cases and places where Jesus worked miracles, He had to end up leaving because of their unbelief. They were more skeptical towards the miracles of Jesus in these cases than they were favoring the miraculous explanation. That's very interesting to me because my response, if I saw my $5 bill turn into 4 ones, would not be to jump to the miraculous explanation. But in the New Testament, they looked at all of the evidence, and still there were people, so specifically the apostles, the disciples, who could only come up with a miraculous explanation that Jesus had truly raised from the dead, or that He had raised somebody from the dead, or that He had turned the water to wine, or that He had walked on the water. And that was the only explanation in light of the evidence that they could come up with. This was not an ultra bias in favor of Jesus working miracles. And that's what I'm saying also with God. We believe in a being who has one of 2 options at His disposal. Catch this. The activities that take place in our world could be attributed to God either by natural explanation, the biological one, or an alternative, which would be a miraculous one. And I'm saying now, this is a longer discussion that I'm not going into tonight, I'm saying that now the miraculous activity of God has been suspended, and I think that the New Testament supports such. But I'm also saying that God still acts through prayer and providence, but He's utilizing natural law. So what I'm saying then, if we go all the way back in time to the origin of the universe, we go all the way back to Genesis 1:1 as far as our chronology goes, I'm saying that the miraculous explanation that God just speaks the world into existence should not be discarded from off the table. It should be kept as a possibility. And if we have a God then that transcends, He's at a distance to some extent from our time, space, or continuum. If God is above natural law, I'm saying he has the power to interject himself into it, create the scientific law in the first place, and then also should it be his desire to speak the world into existence. And that's an explanation that, at least for the Christian, for the believer in Jehovah God, should be kept on the table. For the biological community, that is important. Okay, take a look at number 3. No, we need to get some of these verses. Somebody get for us 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 20. Who has this verse and would like to read it for us? 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 20. Do we have a reader? 1 Timothy chapter 6. Nyoka has it. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 20. Nyoka, whenever you're there, go right ahead.
O Timothy, guard what was committed to your trust, avoiding the profane and vain babblings and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge.
So it says, avoid the thing that is falsely called knowledge. Some people slap this term knowledge on things that it's not authentic. It's not real. Now, somebody else has another translation for us, right? What does 620 say in maybe the King James Version? Science falsely so called. Isn't that how it words it? Science falsely so called. Do you think there are things in our world today that we slap the word, it's scientific. It's scientific. You got to go the way of science. Will we hear that today? Let me tell you something that's very interesting to me. The same community that's insisting that I buy into a pure science thought, a pure ideology of scientific thought, is the same community these days that can't figure out what a boy is and what a girl is. Does that not shock you? What happened to follow the science? You know, it's interesting to me. I went to the urgent care the other day, and I was asking for an explanation on my knee. And this female doctor said, I have knee problems of my own. And she said, you're going to have maybe a little bit of a difference from me. She said, because boys and girls are made differently. I said, ain't that something? You know, who would have ever thought that? Boys and girls are made differently. But the scientific answer today, it almost seems like we're pushing an agenda more than we're pushing follow the actual data. There is such a thing then, folks, as science falsely so called. Take a look at this next verse. This is 2 Timothy 3:7, just a page over. Who's got 2 Timothy 3:7 for us? Eric, go right ahead.
Always learning, never able to come to the knowledge of the truth.
Always learning, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Do you think there are people across this planet that go into the laboratory day after day after day, and they're trying to learn things and still can't ever get to the realest of the real? Do you think that there maybe are preachers who are going into the study every day, opening up the Word of God, and they're learning a lot of good things about God, but never able to fully come to the knowledge of the truth? Yeah, it's all over our nation, folks. There are people who are doing good things, they're studying good things, but still not able to come to the knowledge of the truth. And the Bible even talks about that sort of person. Take a look at number 3. The point that I've been aiming at here for a little while now then is that the miraculous explanation cannot be discarded with God in the mix and must always be kept on the table. So, also, lack of scientific explanation should not bother us. I'm cutting myself off. I'm actually getting a little bit ahead of myself. Tomorrow I'm going to say this one. Let me tell you about I'll bring this up again tomorrow night. Let me tell you about a question that I heard Todd Houston bring up to me here not too long ago. And we'll see how you guys answer. A 5-year-old was at this little event they were having with the church where he was on a Saturday. And they were talking about the flood and some of the things happening about it. And a 5-year-old who's got the science brain better than myself asked the question, raised a hand. A 5-year-old, 5 years old, wanted to know from the preachers in the audience, if the flood happened, how did the freshwater fish survive with the saltwater fish? What's your answer? Somebody have a good answer for us?
There is fresh water in the ocean.
There is fresh water in the ocean.
That's scientific.
Okay, so you're more on the up and up than I would have been. What if we didn't have that explanation? What if Dusty weren't here tonight? Would that really shake us? Would we go home tonight and say, man, that saltwater, freshwater thing, that got me. I think I'm going to give up on God. Do you think that? No, nobody thinks that.
I'm glad she's here.
Yeah, we're glad she's here. That's right. But that's the biological explanation, isn't it? Now, there may be somebody out there who knows the explanation. You know it was once thought, you knew this. Well, anyway, I'll make a different point later. Lots of things that have been thought scientifically throughout the years that we didn't have an explanation for. But we ended up finding an explanation for it. Psalm 8:8 talks about there are paths in the seas. And then it was years down the road that we read about these currents that makes it easier for ships to travel through. And the Bible had it there the whole time, Psalm 8:8, that there are paths in the sea. Talks about the stars a little bit in Job. I'm not sure how much of that's poetic literature versus how much of it's authentic, like it's a historical remark. I'm not real sure. I need to look at that a little bit more. But my point is this. If we didn't have the biological scientific explanation, would that really shake us? Here'd be my response to the 5-year-old. I said, man, that's a good question. I'll have to do some reading on that. Todd did some reading and found out that there were pockets of fresh water in the ocean, kind of like what you're saying. But you know what I would also say? I just wonder if it'd be too much of a feat if God could have the salt water and the freshwater fish cohabitating. If he can also draw out of a rib woman, if he can also resurrect a boy on the 3rd day, and if he can also speak worlds into existence, you think it's that difficult for our God then maybe to sustain saltwater and freshwater fish together?
He kept the mosquitoes around.
He kept the mosquitoes. And that West Nile virus. Yeah. That's no good, is it?
We could have got rid of that.
Yeah. Oh, the point is this. Even if you don't have the biological mechanics all worked out, don't fret, folks. It's a deeper issue. The deeper issue, and this is point number 4, it's a worldview. Discussing the scientific particulars, like paths in the sea or how the freshwater, saltwater fish cohabitated, without discussing God is pointless. These are two radically different worldviews. The biological scientist cannot walk away without the biological explanation. He has to have a biological explanation. And that's the same reason a number of people across the United States of America are no longer believing that Jesus Christ raised from the dead. They are looking for a biological explanation to an event that, at best, is historical. It's not a scientific thing. We're not going to find the DNA that proved Jesus did come back from the dead. You'll not find that evidence. It's an historical basis. And if we only take a look at the scientific angle, the historical gets excluded. We can't prove, then, effectively, that Jesus raised from the dead. We'll not be able to prove that in the laboratory, will we? You can't duplicate that event. So it doesn't do us a whole lot of good to try to walk away looking at it from a scientific lens. Read about the book of Jonah. It only does us so much good to say that we found another case where a fish swallowed a man. Because at the end of the day, we still believe in a miraculous God. So even if that did happen, there's another event where a man lived inside a fish for 3 days, that doesn't bother me. It doesn't affect me one way or the other. We believe in a miraculous God. Let's get into the philosophical considerations. I'll give you 3 arguments why we should believe in God. And then that should be from our top, we have God, and we work our way down to explain the sciences. The 3 arguments are these. The first one is the cosmological argument. Does somebody know well, I think I've got it there. Yeah, cause and effect. It's in the parentheses. This is the argument of cause and effect. William Lane Craig, who is a professor at Talbot School of Theology, excellent philosopher, not a good theologian. So don't listen to him on Bible stuff, but listen to him philosophically. He's right to insist on the precision here. Listen to his argument as he precisely words it. He says the cosmological argument means this. Whatever began to exist had to have a first cause. The reason he words it that way is because God did not begin to exist. God is an independent, I can give you some other words. Let's just go with that. He's an independent being. He didn't come into existence. He's eternal. There's a word for us. He's eternal. And so when we talk about things that were effective, we've got to go back and ask, what was the cause? Would you think, if I saw a ball floating down the stream, beach ball, we had a beach ball in here the other night, somebody was kicking it around Saturday at our VBS workday. Would you think if you saw a beach ball like that floating down this stream, that it just jumped itself into existence? No. We'd stick with the natural order and we'd say somebody put that there. This is the old mind over matter problem, right? Which existed first, chicken or the egg? Same kind of problem. The mind-matter problem. We've got to believe in rationality and mind, specifically the mind of God, that existed before the creation of the material order. And that's what I'm saying. That's what the Bible's saying. You look at some of these passages like Psalm 33. Let's grab these right quick. Look at Psalm 33. Who's our reader? We'll get 6 and 9. The same person will get 33:6 and 33:9. Dylan Watson has it. Dylan, whenever you've got it, go ahead and read Psalm 33:6 and then verse 9 also.
Working Lord, the heavens were made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. Verse 9.
Doesn't sound like much of a biological explanation, but if we're believers in the Bible and believers in the God of the Bible, we believe in the God who can just speak the word and it's done. Here's one more. Look at Hebrews 11:3. Who's our reader on this one? Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 3. Logan, did you have your hand up? Okay, Logan, go ahead. Hebrews 11, verse 3.
By faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made of things which are visible.
God didn't go to the Ace Hardware and ask for the lumber to build the world. He spoke it into existence, right? That's the idea. Look at Hebrews 11:1, Logan, if you're still there. Look at 11:1. This is kind of going back to Caleb's point about faith and science shouldn't be incompatible. Go ahead.
Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen.
Anybody have another word for assurance? Faith is the substance. You're not going to see this translation. It's the grit, right? It's the grit. That's what holds it all together. Faith is not used as some shot in the dark kind of thing. It is the substance or the assurance of the things hoped for, the conviction, or the other word. What do we have as another word there on 11:1? The evidence of things not seen. Our faith is to have evidence. If we don't have the biological explanation, we're not going to have all the biological explanations. All we need is the big view, the big paradigm, and we get that right, and all of the details will fall into place accordingly. That's what I'm aiming for. Take a look at number 2, 4b that is. The teleological argument. The teleological argument. It is the argument from design. In short, in brief, that which is designed had to have a designer. Dixie was telling us about a place the other night in Colorado. What was it called? We're all bad. We don't listen to Dixie, I guess. It's something like Bloodworks. Am I on target with that? Body Works, that's what it was. Body Works. See, we get it. It's a community thing. We get this stuff figured out together, right? Okay. She was talking about the design of the body, wasn't she? She was telling us about how the blood, the cardiovascular system, the DNA system is too intricate for us to just believe. I think that just popped into existence. Look at Hebrews 3:4. Move back a few chapters in Hebrews and look at this. You go and see this beautiful house, one of those big ones that Randy wired up one day. And it's immaculate. It's got the 3 stories. It's got the garage to park all of the nice cars. This thing is the best. And you see this kind of house, and you can imagine walking up this neighborhood where there are other houses like it, and then somebody says, atheist of course, says, my, I wonder how that one sprung into existence. I don't think that goes. You're going to say somebody designed this. Look at Hebrews 3:4. That's his argument. Who's got Hebrews 3:4? Dewey, go right ahead.
This is the English Standard Version. For every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God.
He uses an analogy. You see a house that's built, you know there was a builder. You know there was a contractor, right? There's no way we walk away and say that thing just popped into existence. And so it is the case with God, who is a spirit. He's not materialist. And he transcends, he is above, as point number 2 said, the natural order of things. He created it. That's the God we believe in. Point number C there, 4C, the moral argument. I'm not going to spend long on this one. I'm just going to say this. You take away God, and we have no objective moral standard. What we're left with is pure subjectivism. Okay, so that's the argument there. And that one really, if there's a... Well, let me ask this. Show of hands. You're going to have to give me your opinion. It's not a trick question. I'm not doing anything to you. If you think that the strongest argument here is the cosmological argument, cause and effect, raise your hand. I'm not going to raise my hand. Raise your hand if you think the cosmological, cause and effect argument is the strongest of these 3 for God. Nobody likes that one much. Okay. If you think the design argument is the strongest, raise your hand. Okay. There's not a wrong answer, by the way. If you think the moral argument is the strongest, raise your hand. For whatever it's worth, I am finding in what I'm reading and hearing and seeing, I'm finding that it may not come across as the moral argument being the strongest one for you in person, but it's the strongest right now with the people, the kids of the United States of America. If you're going to make an argument about the existence of God, the cosmological is a great argument. The teleological is a great argument. But the one that's really making our kids stop and think and ponder whether or not there is a God who calls the shots right and wrong as he sees them is the moral argument. Maybe that's the one then with our young people that we ought to be aiming for. You know why that might be? Because there's a lot of stuff that's coming out right now. Transgenderism, legalization of marijuana, and then there's stuff that's been legal for years, but it's just nasty. Fornication, alcoholism, etc., 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 right? And these things are held in question by our young people. And maybe the best question to stop them in their tracks and at least get them thinking is to say, if all that's just not a big deal, who gets to call what is right or wrong? Where does it end? Let me tell you, this is what the historians and everybody's saying. I don't like it, but this is what they're saying. The next step after transgenderism, you're seeing this, by the way. If you're not in the world. Wasn't meant to be a joke, but it's just fact.
Well, I laugh because
You know where I'm headed, yeah.
not to cry, so you might as well.
The next step is pedophilia. We don't call it that anymore. What are we calling it these days? I'm a minor attracted person. Isn't that what they're saying? Show of hands if you've heard that term in the last year. Oh, we've got a number of people. We're hearing it. What about bestiality? Hearing that in the news? Maybe not in the mainstream media, but you're hearing about it, aren't you? Folks, these are the next logical outcomes for people who are without God, and I'm not saying that as a criticism. This is the next step that comes out of when we are so morally degenerate and confused. This is the next logical step. People don't know where to draw the line. And if we don't have a line, that's where the moral... I said I lied to you. I told you I wasn't going to spend long on it, and there I go. What time do we have?
17.
Show of hands if you want to break for the refreshments and come back. Show of hands if you want to do that. Break for refreshments and then come back. Show of hands if you want to just keep pushing on and get done with the lesson and then do the refreshments. Okay, that one wins out. We'll go ahead and finish. Take a look at number 5. This is some scientific considerations. And I won't spend long here. Now you know I'm a liar, though, so who knows. 5, God is above the natural sciences, but can certainly use them to accomplish his bidding. Doesn't bother us if we have an explanation with the saltwater, freshwater fish. God can use the natural sciences. But that means then this. Science may explain some things about the Genesis narrative, but how would it explain these things? How would you get a scientific explanation for this one? Life from the dust. Genesis 2:7. Let's flip over to Genesis and look at this right quick. Genesis 2:7 gives us the affirmation that God breathed into the nose of what had just been shaped out of dust, and it became a man. Anybody have a good biological explanation on that one?
Life begets life.
That's about as good as we're going to get. Life has to come from life. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. It's not exhaustive. It doesn't give us all the details. But that's pretty good, Eric. Life has to come from life, right? You don't get life out of non-life. Matter doesn't spring into life. Not without God animating it. And that's what we have here in 2:7. Take a look at this one. In chapter 2 and verses 18 through 25, we won't read the whole thing. You've read it with me before. He caused the deep sleep to fall upon the man. You have the divine surgery where he takes out one of the ribs, 2:21. And he says this in 2:22, he fashioned out of the rib into a woman that which he had taken from the man and brought her to the man. Do we have a biological explanation how we take a rack of ribs and turn them into a human being? That's not going to go. You could give a whole rack of ribs to the biological guys, couldn't you? And they're still not going to get life out of it. I mean, that's not going to work. But God can do it. And so then there's another question. What about a talking snake? Anybody here seen a talking snake?
Yeah, 7 o'clock.
Oh. Marriage counseling, Friday, 6 o'clock. We'll talk about that later. No, we've not seen the talking snake, have we?
Other than Logan, no.
Yeah.
Genesis says the snake goes on the ground. I'm still standing up. So.
Okay, and you don't eat dust either, do you? You don't eat dust either. You should see him at the Buffalo Wild Wings. He kills about 4 chickens in one second. Okay. All right, the last one is a talking snake. So if you've got the dust, life from a man's rib, or a talking snake, you're not going to get a biological explanation on those, folks. It's a miraculous thing. Take a look at number 6 on the back. The scientific areas, and I listed some of those earlier, should all support the creation account of the Bible. That's where the how, the mechanics, support the why. We don't get the why from the sciences. Why did this stuff happen? We get the how it happened, maybe. But even so, we don't have an exhaustive record of the how either, if there's a miracle involved. That comes to us from the divine revelation, which is the Word of God. Okay, the last blank there on 6, the creation account of the Bible, but they do not prove it. We could come up with all these different scientific facts, good facts, proven facts, but they wouldn't prove the Bible. Let me tell you what I mean. Some years ago, it was held in dispute whether or not there was a people called the Hittite people. Random trivia. Anybody know of a Hittite in the Bible? Go ahead, Ken.
I thought you meant specifically.
Oh, we do know of some Hittites. Uriah the Hittite. Who was he? Bathsheba's husband. David has him killed because he's, well, you get the story. Anyway, so Uriah was a Hittite. Well, that was for the longest time, the archaeologists and the historians and the biological evolutionists all said, this is one of those things where the Bible's got it wrong again. The Hittite people weren't real. Until just a few years ago, the Hittite finds came out, and sure enough, there were Hittite people. That alone won't prove the Bible. Just because Hittite people existed doesn't prove the Bible. You could read historical fiction, right? You could read historical fiction, and it might have some historical facts scattered in there, but it's still a work of historical fiction. These points wouldn't prove the work to be historical, infallible, but they would be necessitated. Does that make sense? In order for the Bible to be legitimate, we would have to believe in the Hittite people. But finding things about the Hittite people wouldn't wholesale convince us of the Bible's authenticity, right? It's kind of complex. Think about it later. Okay, number 7, and here's our last point of the evening, some revelational considerations. The Bible insists in the following: the existence of God. Genesis 1:1, Randy pointed this out to us Monday night. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it talks about a time, space, matter continuum. Those three have to go hand in hand. If you don't have one of the three, the whole thing falls apart. So that's what we're going for on 7a. 7b, a 6-day creation. I can't remember if it's on my next worksheet or not, but there's a thing called the day-age theory, which is to say that each of the days in Genesis is actually like drawn out long time, like millions and millions and billions of years. Just for whatever it's worth, I'm not going to go into all of that. I'm certainly not going to tell you about Hebrew linguistics. But in Genesis chapter 1, you will have noticed that every time it says something about the day, it's an evening and a morning. An evening and a morning. It's never used that way, of an evening and a morning in the Holy Writ, to speak about something other than a 24-hour period. So the point I'm making is there are cases, I've heard this argument made incorrectly. People have said that the Hebrew word behind the word day never speaks of anything other than a 24-hour period. That's false. There are some cases where it talks about the day of redemption, and it means like a whole eon of time. But there is never a case in the Holy Text where it talks about an evening and a morning, and it means something other than a 24-hour period. Does that make sense? Thumbs up if you understand the argument. Okay, good. So 6-day creation. We're not going to turn to it. Let me quote to you Exodus 20:11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy, or hallowed, as the King James says. He set apart the 7th day because it was the day he rested. He sets it up as a prototype for the rest of the creation week. Is that ironic? Ironic, isn't it, that we still have 7-day weeks? Here's where that started. Anyway, okay. All right, 7c. God speaking the world into existence. And we read those passages already, except for the Hebrews 1 through 3. God speaks the world into existence. 7d. The existence of the Garden of Eden and the events within it. And of course, Logan talked about that last night in Genesis chapter 3. And then the last one, in Genesis 1 through 11 is a whole block, it's a whole unit, Genesis 1 through 11. The reality of a global flood. It's one of those cases where you've read about the Grand Canyon and the strata that's there, or you've talked about Mount St. Helens and some of the big things of the earth that somewhat seem inexplicable, right? But if you take the global flood into consideration, this would at least reshape the way we look at some of this. The creationist looks at the Grand Canyon in a different way, I think, than the atheist. You think that's true? Thumbs up if you think that's true. The Christian looks at the Grand Canyon differently than the non-Christian. Or atheist. Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, we're just looking at it from a different angle. It's a different worldview. And we need to try to convince the atheistic community to see it in a better way. I mean, you can't believe in some of this stuff just happening and not having an explanation for it. But anyway, the Bible affirms a global flood. And you've got some passages there. Genesis 6 through 9 is the whole narrative. Okay, let's hit number 8. The New Testament. Look at these with me. Matthew 19. Jesus does something very interesting in a number of places in the New Testament. Matthew 19 just happens to be one of my particular favorites because of how explicit it is. Matthew 24 is not bad either, which I've also got down. But look at Matthew 19. I'm going to have to pick at this. I would let you read it, but I'm just going to move fast. That way we can get to our cookies here soon. This is 19:4. He responds to the Pharisees that were testing him, and in 19:4, you've not read, he says, he who created them from the beginning made them male and female. We've heard that before. That's Genesis. And he quotes 19:5. This is Genesis 2. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. That's 2:25 of Genesis. What Jesus is doing is he is endorsing not just Genesis 2:25. He is endorsing Genesis wholesale. I don't know if you catch the importance of that. That is important for our culture especially. Jesus doesn't have to say everything that Genesis said and reiterate it explicitly to say, I endorse Genesis. His endorsement of 2:25 is enough for us to know that he's endorsing the entire structure set forth in Genesis 1 through 11. So when we hear people say things like, well, Jesus never said anything about homosexuality, or we hear things like, Jesus never said anything about transgenderism, for pity's sake, he didn't have to. He endorses the entire Genesis reading. And by echoing Genesis 2:25, he's endorsing the whole unit there. Take a look at Matthew 24. Somebody might say, I don't know that Jesus really believed in a global flood. Well, it's interesting that in Matthew 24, beginning in 37, he likens this future coming, at least in his day it was a future coming, of the Son of Man. He says in 24:37, it's probably the context of the fall of Jerusalem that he's got in mind. I should say, I'll do this. I know it's that, but to be politically correct, I'll say I think it's about 87. It is about 87. This is 24:37. The coming of the Son of Man, that is the one upon the city of Jerusalem, will be just like the days of Noah. It's a surprise. 1 Thessalonians 5, talking about the second coming, says of Christians it's not going to be a surprise. Why is that? We're prepared for it. What if I called you up tonight as a thief? I'm getting off topic, but I'll finish here soon. What if I called you up tonight and said, I'm going to come rob your house? You think that's much like a thief in the night? Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 5:4, you Christians, he says, it's not that way with you. It is as a thief in the night to those who are not expecting. The coming of Christ is not a big surprise to those of us who've been waiting for it and looking for it, right? So in 24:37, he likens this to the coming of the Son of Man to the days of Noah. And says in 24:38, just as in those days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. Christ then makes the analogy complete and says, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. The first character is Jesus. The second, on number 8, is Paul. Go ahead and fill in the blank there. Paul also. I'm not going to read those for sake of time. 1 Corinthians 11, he's got this context about the veil thing. And he's talking about how there's a structure for the female and there's a structure for the male. Not right for men to wear dresses. He doesn't say that. He talks about having the longer hair in that culture. He was in Grecian culture there. You read about the people in the Mosaic culture, and they had long hair. So he's talking about a cultural thing, but he's talking about in the culture, there is a thing that's appropriate for a man, which is to act like a man, and there's an appropriate thing for a woman, which is to act like a woman. He appeals in 1 Corinthians 11, verses 7 through 9, right back to Genesis. In 1 Corinthians 14, he appeals to Genesis. In Ephesians chapter 5, he appeals to Genesis. In 2 Corinthians 11:3, we will read this one. Look at 2 Corinthians 11:3. Paul's going to talk about his opponents, those guys we've been droning on now for about 5 years in 2 Corinthians talking about. Those guys, he talks about those and says in the same way, well, I'll let one of you read it. Who's got 2 Corinthians 11:3 for us? Caleb, go right ahead. 2 Corinthians 11:3.
But I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ.
He says, in the same way that the opponents are leading people at Corinth astray, he says it was just like that with the serpent and old Eve. And this is Paul treating then the creation narrative, the creation structure, Genesis 1 through 11, as historical. So it won't do to say Paul didn't believe in Genesis. What about, I don't remember Paul talking about a global flood. He doesn't need to. He endorses the whole thing. He endorses the whole thing. Then the last one is Peter. 2 Peter chapter 3 gives us this judgment scene where the world is blasted out of existence. It paints it as having fire all over the globe. And he says in 3:5, talking about Noah, that the world had formerly been flooded by water, even covering the mountains. 3:5 through 7. 2 Peter 3:5 through 7. So we have Jesus, Paul, and Peter, and all three of those guys endorse the Genesis account. Look at number 9. If we are to favor the theological beliefs of the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, then we're going to have to take seriously its scientific and other affirmations. Theological is the first blank on 9. Scientific is the second blank on 9. Now I've got this question. How else would we be able to distinguish between the two? Let me tell you why this is important. Because we've got a university right in our backyard, Milligan, that teaches something like this. The Bible is full of error. We can't believe Genesis 1 through 11 to be historical. We can't believe all of the archaeological finds that the Bible affirms. We can't believe all the scientific things that the Bible affirms. We can't believe all the historical things that the Bible affirms. And even Jesus himself was full of errors. You don't believe me on this, I can prove it. I promise you I can prove it. And what Milligan ends up saying to us, and them and all of the other universities across the planet, nearly all of our other universities are saying the same kind of thing. But we should still somehow believe that Jesus rose from the dead. Okay. What's that? They're picking and choosing. That's right. That's right. You know why they say that? Because we still got to have something that we call faith. We're discarding the basis upon which faith is built. That's where our society is crumbling. You want to know what our number one problem is in our world right now? Biblical illiteracy. We are struggling to be people of the holy text of God. And that's where our problems are coming in. Number 10, our belief or our view in origins must come from a balanced, well-rounded appreciation for all disciplines, especially the revelational, especially the philosophical, especially the historical, and not a special favoring of one over the other. And then I've got this as our summary. Number 11, a balanced, well-rounded view should result in belief of God, his creative power, his holy word that communicates such, and the theological conclusions that are also endorsed. That's what I have this evening. Tomorrow night we'll talk about age of the earth, macro versus microevolution, and the global flood a little bit more. Any closing comments or questions? I should have done that along the way. Dewey's got something. Go ahead, Dewey.
A long time ago, one of the bosses that I had, I was talking to him about the Bible and everything. And I was talking to him about God. And so he said, well, if I ever see him, then I'll take that into account and I'll deal with it then.
Better him than me.
That was the end of the discussion.
Yeah, not good. Not good. Got to be prepared. That's what we're trying to do this week. Lord willing, I've done a good job at it. Thanks for being here. Get a cookie, get a drink, and come back to see somebody get roasted up. God bless you.